Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you are listening or watching us. And thank you for being part of the Material Business Podcast. My name is Monica Hernandez, and I'm your host today. And I have a super special guest, Saba. Thank you for being here and for being open to share with all our audience. We have a lot of really good and interested people in everything that we're going to speak today. We're going to speak a lot about leadership and women in leadership, women in entrepreneurs, and women in STEM, all about all these leadership themes. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Monica.
Without further ado, I normally like to ask people to tell the audience who they are. So who are you, Saba?
Hi, everyone. So my name's Saba Khan. I am a senior scientist from Manchester, from the United Kingdom. I have had several years, well, nearly 20 years of experience in the laboratory. So within academia, within research, within hospital labs, and then more recently within the biotech industry. So I am also the director of the Tiger Team Lab Consultancy Group. So this is a consultancy company which I set up to help biotech startup companies. So I work with new startups and new spin-outs from the university and actually help them to develop their biotechnology or their medical device. And I recently co-founded the Northwest Women in STEM group, and this is a non-profit community interest group aimed at empowering women in STEM within our local community.
It's amazing. So you have several hats that you wear.
Yes.
And everyone is interconnected to kind of the same theme. So science, I heard the word science, the word women, the word community. So where this passion about all these things came up to you, perhaps you can tell the audience a little bit about.
Well, I suppose I've always been quite fascinated with science. It's always been something that I've been passionate about. My mum always wanted, when I was growing up, my mum always wanted me to go into medicine, and this was a very, Asian thing. So culturally, so I'm Pakistani, and culturally, your parents want you to be, the top three, which is doctor, lawyer, dentist. And I was, never made the top three career professions, but I have always been into science. I loved studying biology. I loved chemistry when I was in high school and college. So for me, it's always been there. But I think as I've progressed over the years now, and I'm sort of in my mid to late 30s, I've kind of seen lots of different people struggling as well. So, I've done different roles, but I've also, seen lots of other women in different types of scientific roles, whether that's, an entry level scientist, whether it's a student, whether it's, a lecturer, whether it's a sort of a female entrepreneur, and different levels. And I've seen them struggle in different areas. So that's kind of where I've kind of formed the Northwest Women in STEM group. It's kind of to bring us all together so that, we at least have each other to sort of almost like bounce off and to help each other and support each other.
That's amazing. And what are some of those commonalities that you're hearing? Because you had, it's beautiful when I have people that have been in different industries, because
Yeah.
the look out is very different from someone that is solely focused on lab or research and development or industry. But you have
Yeah.
variety, and as a consultant firsthand, I know that you have the ability to be in different sites at different times. So what are some of those commonalities that you're seeing specifically in this area?
I'd say within the biotech industry, commonalities, I think, with what women might be struggling with, I think is maybe a transition in careers. So I speak to a lot of students who are trying to find their first job, so that's always a big struggle because they're now leaving academia. So it seems to be at the points at which there's, I suppose, transition. So
Mhm.
the point at which you transition from academia to your first job, that's a real, it's change, right? So I suppose that is scary, and so that is one common theme I see. But also women who might have worked in the hospital labs for 10, 15, 20 years, and now they're looking for a career change, or women who've worked in research and academia at a university for several years, and now they're looking to change career paths. So that always seems to be a common theme, and maybe it's the same with men, and you know maybe they just don't show it, but the women seem to be very verbal about this transition and their fear around the unknown and what exists out there. So that seems to be a common theme in terms of what people are struggling with. And then also things to do with like sort of women's health as well. So that came up. We did a survey of sort of what people, what women in the Northwest were struggling with and what they, wanted to see. And women's health was one of the topics that came up, and it did seem like um, there were women going through so many different personal issues, but it really impacted their work, and it really impacted how it was almost like how they perceived or how they thought their colleagues would perceive them for having this issue. And that was quite interesting because it did seem like if they were struggling, it was something that they felt they couldn't share with anyone. And obviously, if it's a personal issue, then it was almost like they had to hide their emotional side and hide that side to them. But then when they came back, when they came back into the office, it feels very much like they have to behave in a very corporate way. So to me, it's almost like women have a sort of like an off-screen and then an on-screen side. So it was almost like this duality in who they are.
It's almost like they are two people in one body, and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have to. The way you're describing it, I was imagining putting a mask on when you are coming into the office or
yeah,
the lab or whatever the setup is,
yeah,
and then taking it off to fully feel who they are. And that's very worrisome because a lot of the mental issues come from, and we know it, there is tons
yeah,
of studies, a lot of mental issues and physical health issues come from not being able to express the feelings, not being able to uh, be comfortable on who we are as
yeah,
human beings. So no wonder why all that struggle is there. You mentioned also that there are um, some personal, and I guess that has to be also with family issues, right? And everything that surrounds that person.
yeah.
So those are some of the struggles. Are there any tips? Are there anything, like if there is someone in the audience and they're like, oh gosh, I feel like that sometimes? Are there any tips that we can say, hey, if you're feeling that way, A, B, C, Z, what can someone
Yeah.
listening to us that thinks, oh gosh, this really resonates? What can they do?
Well, I suppose this is why we set up the Northwest Women in STEM group. But I recently watched a video, and it was a lady talking about how actually when you are repressing your true self and there's actually something you really want to say, but you feel like, oh, I can't say this because I'm, maybe in a meeting, or, I have to behave in a very professional manner because I'm now on a Teams call with, my work colleagues and my boss. But actually repressing what you want to say actually takes more energy. So, and you find this as well. I mean, I do it, and you find this a lot with women. Actually, we bottle things up. We're almost like a little bit of a boiling pot. Like we just we bottle things up until it all comes out, and then it's, everything comes out. Like we just then like spill out all of our guts. But we tend to bottle things up for a very long time. And actually, what this what this speaker was saying was actually, it requires more energy to keep something down. So by voicing, if you're not happy about, the way things are going in a meeting, or the way things are going at work, or you're just not happy with the situation, you should voice it, because it's actually more therapeutic to get it out than to repress it, because then you repress it for so long, and then it bottles up and it gets worse and worse and worse, and the pressure's just almost like boiling up. Then it all comes out, and it's tears, and it's a meltdown, and it gets quite messy, and you kind of think, well, if you just if you weren't happy with something that happened in a meeting last week, then just say it, because I think it does bottle up, and I feel like the longer it goes on, the worse it gets.
I hear you saying we tend to repress because we think it's better.
Yeah.
But we know it, like now that we are older, we know that it is
Yeah.
unhealthy to try to be someone that you're not, first of all, and to represent something that you're not. But why is it so difficult to cross that barrier? Why is it so difficult to say, hey, I am not okay with this?
It's the culture, I think. It's a very corporate culture. I always think of like Ally McBeal, and I always think, gosh, it's not like, we're not living, we're not living like this corporate, dream where we're in offices. But I feel like we still have that almost that loyalty to our bosses and to our company, to say, oh, we can't behave like this because it reflects badly on the company. And so I think there is a very much, I think back, I'm freelance consultant, so I work for myself. So I've kind of stepped out of that corporate world where, you have to, you have to sit there and, shut up and be quiet and, behave a certain way. I don't have to do that anymore, but I used to do that. And so I do understand that, women and men probably feel like they can't, they might not be able to speak out in a meeting or in a seminar or a lecture, because they think their bosses are watching them and it reflects badly on the image, the company image.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very interesting. It's almost like you think that you should do something because you think that someone will think about you, but it is culturally, like you said.
Yeah.
So it requires self work, I guess. And then you mentioned something that is very important, is having a community, having someone to say, hey, this is happening to me. Has ever this happened to you? Or what did you do in this situation? So
Yeah.
surrounding yourself with that support is one of the important lessons, I guess, that we can draw.
Yeah. And I always find as well, like the less people say, because they feel it almost becomes quite robotic. You become this sort of robotic person who just has to meet their KPIs, who just has to go into the lab and generate data or produce papers and manuscripts. You feel like you feel like your job description, and that is who you are, and that's all you carry out. But then it comes to a point where, because you see things, or you might, I worked in academia, I saw a lot of bullying. I saw a lot of PhD students get bullied by their professors, and it's kind of like the longer you don't say anything, the worse it gets, because then you almost like live in this sort of community now where actually people are being gaslighted all the time, because you can't, even if you say something, it's like, oh, well, that never happened, because it's almost like we've not seen it. And I would say working in academia and then working in like the industry, like business, I would say that was definitely worse in academia, because it was almost like the higher up you became as well, it was almost like it was a culture then, because it was like, oh well, we can do this but get away with it because we've denied it ever happened. And it becomes almost like this culture where no one says anything, and and even if something does happen, no one's going to admit to it, or no one's going to be held accountable, which is really bad, because this is where a lot of this is kind of where a lot of things happen in workplaces, and it just goes under the radar. But I'd say in the business world, I definitely have seen the difference, as in, everyone's a lot more straight up and honest. And if there is, it's not going to be bullying in a sort of a backhanded way. It's going to be very direct, as in, I need this done. It affects my sales, it's going to affect commission, we need to get this product out the door. So it's a much more different way of working, and I prefer that, because it's so straight up and honest. Whereas I'd say in academia, there was a lot of things that happened which it wasn't right, but it kind of just went under the radar.
That's very interesting. And personally, having been in academia for a long time, so it's bringing that perspective is always interesting, and that's why I love to have someone that has all those opportunities to look at different ways, and then have that parallel on saying, yeah, absolutely, it's worst just because people that have the power are more entitled to it or feel entitled to it, and then diminish whoever is underneath that level.
Yeah, it's really weird, because it's just very different worlds. And I would say in academia, if in the world of research and science, you would say, having a first author paper is amazing, and having your name on publications is it's really esteemed. And this is how professors get their sort of respect, is the number of first author publications they have, because that's the merit, that's what they're sort of valued against. And then the minute you leave the university, and the minute you leave academia and you leave the university and go into any other job, you realize it doesn't mean anything. It has absolutely no meaning. And so you will be explaining to someone what a first author publication is, and they will naturally say, oh, does that mean you've written a book? And you say, no, it's not really a book. It's like 7 to 8 pages of paper. And they're like, oh, right, so you wrote 7 to 8 pages of paper. And you're like, well, I didn't write all of the paper. I made a graph. I made this bigger. And they look at it and they're like, oh, okay, it's just a graph. And you're kind of like, yeah, it looks like just a graph, but actually that was 1 year of my life. And these tiny little stars that you can see, that means it's statistically significant. So to get those little stars on a graph, I had to do that experiment several times, and it nearly broke me, because I was in the lab till 8, 9 o'clock in the evening doing these experiments. But it's really weird, because it's like perspective, right? Because when you're in the lab and you're in research, that is the most important thing to you at that time. And it's just such a huge thing. And then the minute you leave and you go into any other industry, whether, biotech, medtech, lab automation, whatever you go into, they don't understand it. And when you start explaining it to them, you kind of think, gosh, yeah, it's not really that important, is it? It's just, but you put yourself through a lot of stress to get, this tiny little graph in, a few sheets of paper. And it's really weird. It's just like perceptions.
It's so important that you bring that point. I was just imagining, when we do recruitment processes and we have new grads.
Yeah.
because there is not a lot to put in the resume yet. They will put their GPA, and they are so proud about their
Okay.
GPA, and it's like, oh, I got whatever it is, 4.7 and 3 point whatever, and it doesn't really mean a lot in the industry, because all I want to know is if he's capable of doing what I want him or her to do.
Yeah, yeah,
And with the tools that I'm giving, and then learn from it and then grow. That's all it matters in this industry. So it's absolutely perspective. I can imagine someone that goes from industry to academia the other way around. It will
yeah,
be like so so slow pace to get so many experiments and so many things done and redone, and then yet in
yeah,
industry we get frustrated with one time that we have to repeat an operation.
yeah, yeah. It's weird, and it just makes you realize that, you look back on it and you think, gosh, not that it's petty, because obviously research does, it does contribute to, it affects healthcare, and it affects the world around us, but it is just at such a slow pace. And one of the things that really frustrated me, sort of transitioning, I worked at the university, and I thought I was, even in my early 20s, I thought I was going to retire there. I thought that was my life. I didn't see a world outside of this, this building. To me, that was everything. But as soon as I left, one of the things that really frustrated me actually was that, you could spend so long doing experiments, getting those graphs, and it would sit on your professor's desk for maybe years before they say, oh, well, we can't publish it just yet because we want to wait for the next, we want to wait for another PhD student to come in so they can add this experiment, and they can add this, and then they can add this. So actually, I'd probably say 80% of the work I did didn't actually go into a manuscript. It was just waiting for the next project to come along, or the next student to come along to continue on. And that to me just felt like such a waste. It felt like a waste of my effort. And it was weird because as soon as I left and I joined the UK Health and Security Agency, so I worked for the government setting up COVID testing labs, and it felt like I could put in the same amount of effort, but you could see the impact it was having on public health, because you knew immediately you were setting up a lab in, 2 months' time. They would be, processing patient samples, and then they would be processing patient samples, and then they would be reporting those samples, reporting those results. And it was, actually impacting people's lives. They were going to get an instant result. So that to me just felt like, you know, I think academia was good, as in it gave me the sort of the foundations, but actually going out and working in different organizations and different companies, I think that I learned more from that.
See? So what was the push? What was that thing that said, Saba, today I decided I need to go? Or it was more a soft transition? Like, what was the transition like?
I think for me, it kind of all happened around the time of the pandemic, because we were all put on furlough, so we were told to sit at home, and that kind of really frustrated me, because I kind of thought, well, no, I want to come in. I want to be, this is kind of like my field. It's my time. It's my time to shine. It's my time to go in and do lab work. If there was any time to go into the lab and do lab work, it would be now. So I was really frustrated that my professor was like, no, just stay at home, you're on furlough. Um, so it really annoyed me. And then I kind of started coming in voluntarily to be a part of this sort of this COVID-19 clinical trial at the University of Manchester, which I really enjoyed doing that. And I was like, we were one of the very few people in the laboratory, and it was quite a nice time to be in the lab. You really did feel like you were making a difference, actually. That would be the only time the work that you did in the lab was, published. That felt to me as quite, that actually felt quite rewarding. And that was at the same time that the sort of the film industry had come to a complete standstill. So there was no filming going on anywhere because they couldn't guarantee the safety of the host. And we were approached by the National Geographic and Disney because they wanted to do some filming out in Iceland, and they said they needed an immunologist. So I actually then, left the university to then go and work in the film industry and actually set up a COVID-19 testing lab for about 200 camera crew. So I was based in a lab or set up a lab in Reykjavik. So that was an amazing experience for me, and being very operational and actually working in an industry where if you said, "Oh, I need this," they bought it for you straight away. There was no red tape, there was no bureaucracy. There was, you could whatever you needed, because obviously the cost of film production was that high that whatever you needed you got. And they had I had sort of, I think there was 3 internal flights coming in every single day with nasal swabs because the camera crew were based across 3 different locations filming. So I had flights coming in with those swabs, so I was testing them. But just the operational side of it and how quickly they were able to set up a lab, and there was no barriers, and I enjoyed that side. So then when I came back to the UK, actually, I decided I wanted to work for the government, setting up labs and setting up COVID-19 testing labs. And then off the back of that, I got to meet a lot of scientists, train a lot of scientists as well. And then I got into lab automation and biotech. So yeah, I transitioned very quickly from being sort of an employee at a university where I thought I was going to retire and get my pension, to then, very quickly sort of traveling, meeting so many different people, traveling to lots of different laboratories, internationally, but then also within the UK. And then, just going freelance and then becoming a consultant. So yeah, that transition sort of happened during the pandemic. But I suppose the thing that kind of triggered that was I just didn't feel like I should be sitting at home during a pandemic. Like, it felt like that was my time to go into the lab. If there was any time to do lab work, it was now.
So it was self-driven. Nobody told you to do it. Nobody was coming from inside. And I guess those are the transformational moments of person or any person, that when you're listening to what the inside is telling you, it's like I feel like I can do better, I can do more, and I need to contribute is now. So that is your motivation right there.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think about like how I was at the time, and I think I felt like insulted. I felt angry, like, how dare you make me sit at home? Like, this is the most boring thing I could possibly do, is sit at home doing nothing. Like, I want to be in the lab. So I think that kind of I think that's how I was feeling at the time. Like, how dare they?
And that's so interesting, because every person that has come to the podcast that has made a transition or made a change or a career, name it career or environment or whatever the change is, it's sparked by 2 things: their internal desire, and they are fed up with everything that is outside of them. It's like, how dare you? Like, I can do better. It's like, no, don't insult me. Like, you'll see. So that's it's a commonality. So it's super interesting to see that from people that have come to the podcast. Thank you for sharing, Saba. Naturally, it seems like you have a lot of, that innate leader within you. And then now with like being your own boss, not in one company, but several companies, and having teams in different areas. And then a lot of people maybe ask themselves, if they are listening to us, like, how does she do all that? Like, how does she lead uh, all those teams? Like, what is your one thing that gravels you specifically in the leadership area?
I would say in my head, I kind of just see, I need to get this done. So I will just go for it. So I will just, whatever needs to be done, I will just do it. And I'm probably not the best person at delegating work. So I'm not the best person to say, right, you should do this, you should do that. I just will do it. And I suppose people will kind of either step back and say, oh, well, she's doing it, it's fine. Or they will see, oh, she's doing this, so they kind of jump on board. So I would say it's kind of like I get a mixture of responses. So yeah, people will either see that, okay, she's got this idea or she's got this concept and she wants to build, she wants to build a Northwest Women in STEM group, or she wants to build this. They will either come on board or they'll just go, oh, well, she's got a hang of it, so she'll be fine. We'll just check in on her later to see, how she's getting along. So I think kind of just, yeah, having that vision and going for it, and then, people see into your vision as well. So they'll see what you're trying to achieve and then contribute to it in, their way. So yeah, I'm not a very typical, I would say in terms of leadership, I'm not a very typical, I'm not like a typical leader. I would say um, I'm kind of very, I'm kind of very free thinking and a bit of a lone wolf in that sense, as in I will do it. And then people will kind of contribute in their own way.
Mm-hmm. So you will be, and then whoever aligns with your vibration will stick and they will
Yeah.
contribute. Interesting.
People who get you will just get you and then just jump on board, and they'll be like, oh, well, we can do marketing for you, or we can help you set up, a conference or an exhibition. So you kind of, I don't know, I feel like I'm not, I wouldn't say I'm like the best leader, but I think for my personality, I just kind of, I say, this is what I want to achieve and this is what I want, and see who kind of falls into place and says, oh, we can help you with this, or we can contribute this. So I suppose that's kind of the way I am.
And I think that is why we are having this podcast.
Yeah.
It was an instant click, and when we spoke in a very unconventional time,
It was on Boxing Day, wasn't it?
Boxing Day, right? Everyone was celebrating Christmas and things like that,
Yeah.
going buying things, and then here we are talking about how we can contribute to the better of women in STEM and bio
Yeah.
and of all that. So it's very interesting how definitely you create that ripple effect, and then that attracts exactly who and what you need at that moment.
Yeah. 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 And I would say, you know, I remember, events that I've attended, and, they might have been 2 years ago, 3 years ago, but it might have been, very small scale. It might have been sort of a local event. But, if there was something that was, women in biotech or women in medtech, if it was a seminar or a meeting or a forum, I would always attend them. So I'd say it's, that's probably, they don't realize that they've had a ripple effect, as in,
Mhm,
something that I've attended several years ago
mhm,
as an attendee, or being on a panel and talking about my journey as a, transitioning from, science to business. That's obviously had a lasting impact on me, because now I'm setting up a group. So it probably is like very small effects, like she says, there's a ripple effect, and I think it is, I think it is making, or hopefully making, a bigger impact.
I think so, and I think that every little contribution uh,
Mm,
adds up to what it is in the big scheme of things, and
mm,
how perhaps because we all are in so different levels, different countries, different cultures, different
Mm.
socioeconomical, educational, political, and
Mm.
everything. And throughout our lives, we pass through different stages. The new moms, the ones that don't have kids, the ones that
Yeah.
are not married, they're the singles, the widow, the whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a different stage. So perhaps the effect that you will have in someone that is listening to this podcast, perhaps is not 300 people at once, but it will be
Mm.
one person today and perhaps in 6 months, someone
Mm.
else in like you said, in several
Mm.
years, someone else. So it's those, uh, the addition of all those little things that make really who you are and what is that you want to live. But uh, it's is nothing but inspirational hearing someone that had, because a lot of us, and I remember when I was getting the step into corporate, and I had the same feeling, right? When I got my
Yeah.
first big job in a big corporation, it was like, oh, I'm gonna retire here because everyone retired from there, right? It's like I'm
Yeah.
never gonna do the resume again. I crushed that, and it was like, oh, yeah. But then life happens, and then you
Yeah. Yeah.
discover other things outside that are marvelous. And quite honestly, the best things of my life have been outside of my comfort zone. And I say that
Yeah.
with no doubt. A lot of the times that are very complicated, and we spoke about that earlier in this time, is sometimes you feel like people are watching and what they're going to say. But if you don't step out of that comfort zone, you're never really going to know.
Yeah. Yeah. And I quite often just say to myself, well, to be honest, I probably never see that person ever again in my life, so what do I care what they think? Um, and chances are I'll probably meet them at every single event going forward. But if you have that, if you have that kind of mindset, oh, I probably will never see that person ever again. Who cares? I feel like you get over those sort of self inhibitions.
And that's a really good tip that anyone that is listening to the Material Business podcast, it's something easy to grasp, is really don't think a lot about it, because probably they are not thinking. The other day I read a quote saying, not everybody is thinking about you, like you're not that important. So it's like, get over it. Okay, you're not that important. So uh yeah, sometimes it is in our heads a lot,
Mm,
and then we start the rabbit hole, and then it gets complicated, and we complicate a lot of things just because we go on and on and
yeah,
on and on.
yeah,
So that's one of the tips perhaps to someone that is listening to us, is it's no, probably they don't, and if they do, then it's a good teaching moment to have a healthy conversation.
yeah, yeah. I think you do have to almost like sit yourself down and say, you know, I don't, this person's opinion of me, it's meaningless, right? Because, you might be in that job for, 5 years or, 5 months. Like, it really doesn't matter. And when you've kind of like been in lots of different work environments and met lots of different people, it's kind of like, well, how many of them do you keep in contact with? I mean, I'm really bad at keeping in contact with people. Um, but it's like, how many of those people have you kept in contact with? And, yeah, I kind of think, you shouldn't really think about people. I think you should just think about what you're trying to achieve. So your job, what your tasks are, what you want to get done. I think thinking more about that, I think, is a lot more positive. It just gives you that energy to say, okay, today I need to get up and, send out some emails. I need to reach out to this person. I feel like that to me is more rewarding than sitting there worrying about what someone might think of you because you've done X, Y, and Z. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your energy, right?
absolutely. So what are you putting your energy towards?
Mm,
Success or worry? Like if
mm,
you're putting it to worry, you're doing nothing. You're not advancing. You're not. But if you're putting it to being productive, then
yeah.
it is. it is more rewarding at some point. Perhaps it's not right away, but at some point it will become. So those are great tips. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And also, I feel like we just, we have we're all human, right? And we have the right to be human. So we have the right to make mistakes, right? So, you know, there's no, to me, I never think of anything as being right or wrong because we're all on our own personal journey. We're all learning about ourselves. We're learning about what works, what doesn't work. We're all on our own journey. So, I don't look at other people and think, oh gosh, that's, you've just got a job at that company. It's absolutely terrible. I kind of think, everyone's going to learn from every single experience they have. And if the way you look at it, it will always be positive. It depends on how you perceive it, right? So I think, I'm on my own personal journey and other people are on their own personal journey. Um, but yeah, I would never look at anything and say that's terrible or, that's really bad. I wouldn't have done that. So I try to not judge other people, but then I also try not to judge myself, as in, you know, I'm not going to hold myself up to this really high standard because I'm a human being. I can make mistakes, and if there's something that I see as worthwhile doing, then that's what I'm going to do. And everything that I'm doing on that journey is my learning lesson.
Absolutely. And that's I think that's one of the things that makes us click so much is
Mm.
because I also think we come, and I say it that all the time, we come to earth to learn. There is no good
Mm.
or bad decisions, there is just decisions. And
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
a lot of people are very afraid of making mistakes. And I remember in one of my earlier interviews in my career, the person that was interviewed me said, "Tell me one time that you made a mistake." And I said, I don't do mistakes. I just have learnings. And so it's, "Oh, you're so arrogant." And I'm not arrogant. I just learn from my mistakes. It's only
Yeah,
a mistake if you repeat it.
yeah,
That,
yeah, yeah,
of course, it is. If you know that you're going to fall, then take a shortcut and go around, or I don't know, do something
yeah,
else. So it is, again, that perception that, oh my God, you're so arrogant. How dare you? Just, well, because that's who I am. Um, but getting into that level of being able to say, because that's who I am, takes a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of forgiveness,
yeah.
and
Self-forgiveness. Yeah,
and a lot of saying, "Hey, I'm just human, and that's who I am, and it's okay if it doesn't click with you. Fine, there is 10,000 other companies, and if there
yeah,
is not a company, I'll create my company."
yeah,
And it's we are creators, but
yeah,
it is not something that is taught in school, or to kids. Or so I wish there was so much more empowerment at a younger age. So if there is any
yeah,
younger guys or girls or listening to this, is you absolutely have the power, and nobody should tell you how much you can or you cannot do. It's only your decision.
yeah, yeah. That's very true. And I always think we're always taught as well from a very young age, and it's kind of like been indoctrinated in us that everyone else has the answers.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
knowledge is out there. Everything is out there. And you get, as you get older and older, you realize, gosh, these people don't have the answers. They're not these, all wise, all knowing human beings. They're not these, this thing doesn't exist. What we're told, what we've been told from a very early childhood is that, everybody knows more than us. And we have to respect everybody else because they have more knowledge than us. And as you get older, I don't know, I kind of think, no, we're all equal. There's no, there's no, and maybe, especially coming from a very academic background as well, you're always, the teachers have more knowledge than you, so you respect them. And then it becomes professors, and then, it's almost like it's not a form of slavery, but you're just always a subordinate because everybody is more knowledgeable and more powerful than you. But then you realize actually you've given them that power.
Mhm.
They don't have more power than you. And, they might be more knowledgeable on one subject, but you're also a subject matter expert in your own field. And so actually everybody, even if you're a housewife, like everybody has their own knowledge and their own experiences and something that you could learn from. So actually, I don't have that thing anymore. I used to have it for, many years, sort of going through academia, but I don't have that anymore where, gosh, this person's a CEO, so they must be super powerful and super knowledgeable and, gosh, I must kiss their feet. No, I don't have that anymore because, if you do meet them, you realize they're probably having a meltdown, internally, they're probably going through so many struggles and actually, they're really struggling in that role. And so, yeah, I think as I've got older, I really don't look at people's job titles anymore and say, oh gosh, that person must have more wealth, more power, more knowledge. They've got a higher status than me. I actually just think we're all equal and we've all got something to learn from everybody else. So, that's kind of how I see the world and how I see people. But yeah, I've been approached by people who've gone, oh, well, you know, I'm a life coach, so I'm more important, or I'm a CEO, so I'm more important. And I think, nope, you're all just equal.
Well, here we have two CEOs,
Yeah,
two, two founders, two revolutionaries. So it is, yeah, it is. And we are just collaborating and enjoying
yeah,
so
yeah,
much what we do because we get to see other people benefiting and
yeah,
we give our best, and then we do it with love, and then that makes our
yeah.
days better. So there you go. Everyone that is listening, no, no difference.
There's no hierarchy.
It's
Yeah,
just collaboration, putting out there so it blossoms at some
yeah.
point. Saba, it's flown so fast. The time is gone. I have so much fun. Thank you for being here with us, for speaking about all those subjects, for being so open. I really enjoy talking to you. I think we can extend this for 3 hours, but
I know.
we'll bring another time. We'll bring you another time and have chapter 2 and
Yeah.
3 and 4 and so on. Any last message for the audience of Material Business that you can leave?
I think my one message is to believe in yourself and not to give it away. Quite often we give our power away. We give we give so much of ourselves away that we just don't save anything. And I think, believe in yourself and empower yourself. Only you can only you are on your own journey and only you can make that change. So I think, believe in yourself and don't give it away.
Amazing. Beautiful close out. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for all the audience of Material Business for sharing, for liking, for, being here and making us grow. This is why we are here and why we do this. And we'll see you again in the next episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.